to Crash Course. I'm your host, Nate Gerke. Today, we're going to focus on World War II, but not Europe, the US and Japan, an often overlooked part of the war, specifically the horrific atomic bombings by the US. There was no justification for the United States to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. In Europe in 1941, World War II was in full swing. The Pacific War was starting at the end of 1941, with Japan opposing the Allied powers. The Pacific War kicked off on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese Air Force bombed U.S. Naval Base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. 4 U.S. naval battleships were sunk, and the rest were damaged. 2,403 Americans and 1,178 people of other nationalities were killed. This ruthless attack led directly to America's entry into the war in the Pacific and in Europe. The U.S. was not going to let Japan off the hook for what they did. On July 26, 1945, in the Potsdam Declaration, the U.S., the U.K., and China offered Japan the final opportunity for unconditional surrender. The document was issued by Harry S. Truman, Winston Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek. It threatened her with prompt and utter destruction unless she surrendered unconditionally, after which there would be a military occupation until a responsible and democratic government was set up. Japan would have to pay for reparations, be demilitarized, her war criminals would be punished, and she would lose territory. Meanwhile, throughout July 1945, the U.S. launched the Manhattan Project, which was a research and development program that produced the first nuclear weapons during World War II. The Manhattan Project began modestly in 1939, but grew to employ more than 130,000 people and cost nearly $2 billion, about $26 billion in 2016 dollars. The result of the project was the creation of the bombs that would later be used on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The U.S. conducted one atomic bomb test before bombing Japan. It was called the Trinity Nuclear Test. The bomb was tested in New Mexico in the desert near Alamogordo Army Airfield. An eyewitness called the massive explosion unprecedented, magnificent, beautiful, stupendous, and terrifying. On August 6th, the U.S. dropped a uranium gun-type atomic bomb, Little Boy, on the city of Hiroshima. American President Harry S. Truman called for Japan's surrender 16 hours later, warning them to expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. 3 days later, on August 9th, the U.S. dropped a plutonium implosion-type bomb, Fat Man, on the city of Nagasaki. Co-pilot of the Enola Gay, Robert A. Lewis, said, "My God, what have we done?" after dropping Little Boy on Hiroshima. A survivor of the atomic bomb described the scene like, "There were people crying out for help, calling after members of their family. I saw a schoolgirl with her eye hanging out of its socket. People looked like ghosts, bleeding and trying to walk before collapsing. Some had lost limbs. There were charred bodies everywhere, including in the river. I looked down and saw a man clutching a hole in his stomach, trying to stop the organs from spilling out. The smell of burning flesh was overpowering." Mr. Gerke, Mr. Gerke, Mr. Gerke. Yes, me from the past? Didn't the bombing save many American and Japanese lives? Well, me from the past. The results of the atomic bombings were disastrous. Within the first 2 to 4 months of the bombings, the acute effects of the atomic bombings killed about 90,000 to 146,000 people in Hiroshima, and about 39,000 to 80,000 in Nagasaki. During the following months, large numbers of the Japanese population died from the effects of burns, radiation sickness, and other injuries, compounded by illness and malnutrition. In both cities, most of the dead were civilians. It also caused many long-term health defects, mostly resulting from radiation. The occurrence of leukemia in Japan increased massively 2 to 6 years after the bombings. In contrast to the Japanese population, the American population was not at all affected by the atomic bombings. In fact, most of the people were not sufficiently informed about the circumstances of the attack and thus did not oppose the decisions made by the government. A poll taken on August 8, 1945, found that only 10% of the population stood against the use of bombs in Japan. 85% approved. Many Americans condoned the bombings of Japan. It seems as though many Americans were convinced by the government that this needed to be done. Americans failed to understand that there were more options than just war and the A-bombs, thus having them believe that it saved Japanese lives. Many people did not understand the magnitude of the war and the decisions made by their leaders because they were in a safe place within the U.S. Time for an open letter. Thank you. An open letter from Japan. Dear Nate, the California roll is not sushi. Thank you, Japan, for recognizing that our country needs to Americanize everything. There were many alternatives to aid bombing major Japanese cities. Instead of immediately bombing important, densely populated cities, we could have also done a demonstration of the bomb. The U.S. could have dropped one in a remote area so the Japanese could understand the magnitude and danger of it. It would have acted as a threat. This is what will happen to you if you don't surrender. If representatives of the Japanese government, military, and scientific community could have seen the bomb, it might have been enough to convince them of the foolishness of a continued resistance. Another option was to wait for the Russians. The US and the USSR were allies during the war, and Russia had recently declared war on Japan. Chances were they were going to join the war against Japan. One more option was to continue our conventional bombing. Many military analysts were convinced that Japan was very close to surrendering. The continued use of our superior air power and weapons would have eventually convinced the government that they were outlaws and must surrender. A report called the Strategic Bombing Survey, done by the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, stated, "Nevertheless, it seems clear that even without the atomic bombing attacks, air supremacy over Japan could have exerted sufficient pressure to bring about unconditional surrender and obviate the need for invasion. Based on a detailed investigation of all facts and supported by the testimony of the surviving Japanese leaders involved, it is the survey's opinion that certainly prior to December 31st, 1945, and in all probability prior to November 1st, 1945, Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bombs had not been dropped, even if Russia had not entered the war, and even if no invasion had been planned or contemplated. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not justified. First off, most of the Japanese citizens were against the military aggressiveness of their government and did not agree with their actions with Pearl Harbor and their involvement in China. We did not kill their government, we killed them. Second off, there were much less destructive and murderous ways to solve the conflict. Alternative strategies were present. Third off, the atomic bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima were war crimes. They were not officially war crimes, but technically were. A model country does not commit disturbing war crimes. The bombings took thousands of lives and hurt and destroyed many more. The bombings were not justified in any way. So you may ask yourself, were they justified? I can definitively say no. That's all we have for this week. I'm Nate Gerke. Thanks for watching.